The president came out last week, specifically over the weekend, and said that he wants the Washington Commanders to return to the Redskin name. He wants the Cleveland Guardians to return to the Cleveland Indians. And he has even threatened that if the Commanders do not change their name specifically, they may not be able to get their new stadium that they are looking to fund back RFK sort of in downtown Washington, D.C., Maryland area, as opposed to where the current stadium is at right now, out in the suburbs. So, Josh, do you have really a strong opinion on whether or not the Commanders or Guardians should switch back to that original team name?
So, when they had that original name, I respectfully chose not to say it on air. I just called them Washington because I just find that name to be racist and, stereotypical, all those types of words. I don't need to get into it. And with the Cleveland Indians, I didn't necessarily mind the name Indians. It was more the Chief Wahoo logo that I had an issue with, for the same reason that I didn't like Washington's original name. So the fact that President Trump wants both teams to go back to their original names, based off of how his first presidency went and how this current presidency is going, it doesn't surprise me. Do I think he'll actually follow through and prevent the Commanders from building the new RFK stadium? I'm not too sure. Sometimes he'll say things but not actually do it. So it's kind of a tricky line he's walking, or you know what I mean there.
Hopefully. Yeah, for sure. This name thing has obviously came up the last few years. I always thought if they're going to make the Indians change specifically, they should probably make the Atlanta Braves change and, at least get rid of the Tomahawk. Same thing in Kansas City with the Chiefs. They have not done that. Obviously, it's a complicated subject. I think you can make the case for both. But listen, I think at the end of the day, the bigger story, it really doesn't matter, obviously, the name of the team. Some people that are older generation are going to get madder than others. But I think the stadium story is the story here because Landover Field or whatever it's called now, it used to be called FedEx Field, where they play out there.
Northwest Stadium in Landover, Maryland. But that stadium is
exactly. It's a dump. It's probably the 32nd out of 32nd stadiums in the NFL if you're grading stadiums. I don't think a lot of people would make an argument for that. And the Commanders, listen, over the past few years, they've got a new name. They got a new owner. They got a new coach. And they finally have a franchise quarterback. And for being the dumpster fire of an organization that they were for 20 years, I think Commanders sort of has represented this new era for them. I think that name should probably stay for the situation when it comes to the Cleveland Guardians / Indians. I know many people in my inner circle who don't even agree with what President Trump is saying, but are still calling them the Indians because they refuse to call them the Guardians because they believe that Indians should have not been taken away. So I don't care either way. I still call them the Guardians. I call them the G-Men. I call them the Indians. It's really interchangeable. But if they went back to their team name, I really wouldn't care.
Yeah. Again, with the Indians, it was more so Chief Wahoo that I had an issue with rather than the name Indians. And I get it. Like, people were pushing for Washington to change their name, and people were pushing for the Indians to change their name. And yet there wasn't a lot of the same conversation around the Chicago Blackhawks or the Florida State Seminoles. There was a bit of a conversation, as you said, about the Atlanta Braves and the Kansas City Chiefs. But again, there was nothing really in terms of either the Florida State Seminoles, at least not that I've heard, or the Chicago Blackhawks. So for me, it's very interesting that Washington and Cleveland are once again at the center of this particular conversation. Again, we're trying to keep this as sports-centric of a conversation as we can.
And we should make politics. We should make a note that the Cleveland Guardians organization has came out and basically said we're not changing the name.
Yeah. By the way, I predicted they would go with the name Guardians, but not because of the bridge statues by the stadium. I actually predicted the name Guardians because their stadium is right next to Rocket Arena. And so I'm like, well, if the Indians are going to change their name and they're neighbors with the Cavaliers, they should have a name that goes with the Cavaliers. Let's see, what goes with defense and defending the city and all that type of stuff? Oh, how about Guardians?
Yeah, and I know that they did all those studies when they were changing the name, and the Native Americans came out and basically said that they didn't have a problem with the name. It was more of the cheap Wahoo stuff, obviously, which they had been fading away even before the name change. But we know the name change was only official. I don't know if you know this or not, but basically they agreed to change the name so then we could get the 2019 MLB All-Star game.
Yeah. And I do know that while they were still called the Indians, at a number of their home openers, there were people outside like protesting.
Yeah, so obviously it's a touchy subject. We will remain updated and vigilant as we get more information on it.